And welcome back, folks. Now, as I've often said, what we're seeing rising in the world today is ultimately corporatism. That's what's happening to the human race. But really, what it is corporate authoritarianism, because we are most certainly seeing a rise in authoritarianism as related to corporatism. I mean, this is basically what our police have turned into these days, folks. They're basically hired thugs for corporations who spend most of their time enforcing non-existent contracts against people who are attempting to stand up to corporate corruption. That's basically what we see from our police these days. I mean, this is very amply demonstrated in practices such as coal seam gas mining. What we've seen in Western Australia is literally hundreds of police on site in order to escort gas companies. This is before anybody's blocked anybody off. There hasn't been any roadblocks. There's just people there at a campsite with protest signs. No road blockages or anything have happened, and the police are there to make sure the way is clear. So it would appear that the police are being subcontracted by corporations to act as their security. And folks, this goes way beyond apprehending criminals. It goes way beyond preventing crime. It goes way beyond enforcing law. What these police are being used to do is to act as security guards for corrupt corporations that are destroying the water table. That seems to be their job these days. The job of the police is to maintain the corporate hold over the globe and to make sure that everybody keeps in line. And okay, so you're all in line and you're all quite happy. Well, if you're all in line and you're quite happy, then we can't control you. So we're going to increase the measures a little bit. We're going to make the laws a little bit more draconian, and we're going to keep pushing until every one of you has broken a law so that we can at last have you all uniform in the eyes of the law. And this is what they're intending to do all over the world, folks. And we've certainly seen this a lot in Byron Bay here, the town where I live in Australia. I mean, even though we're not seeing people standing up against corporate corruption in this town, because we've kept most of the major corporations out of this town, like we don't have a McDonald's, we don't have fluoride in the water here, we don't have a lot of things that the government would like us to have. And so what we've seen in order to replace that is just a huge escalation in police presence in town. And it's like I said on earlier shows about the concept of total criminalisation. The government cannot control innocent people. The government can only clamp down on criminals. So what they do is they ramp up police presence and they make the police as oppressive to the people as possible, which makes it possible for anybody to break the law at any time simply by standing up to a police officer who is oppressing you, because this would be resisting arrest or assaulting a police officer or whatever you do. I mean, these guys are virtually untouchable because they believe that they can come along and oppress you and create as much controversy as they like, and because you don't know your rights, they can get away with it. And they do get away with it, and so that's what they're doing in Byron Bay here. They're simply increasing the police presence. We have police riding around on bicycles in pairs now. We have breath tests and roadside checks. We have police wandering around town in packs of 3. These are like gangs of armed thugs walking around in fancy dress. And so that's what's going on here in Byron Bay. And they're doing this because this is such an awake community. This is such an aware community, and we've been able to hold off government repression and corporate corruption quite effectively so far. But now we have a new police chief who believes that the Byron people get it a little bit too easy, and so he's attempting to change things. And this is, of course, all part of the government agenda, folks. They don't like people to be free. And I'll just fill you in a little bit on what's actually been happening around here, and you can have a look in your own town and you can tell me whether you're seeing similar things happen in your town. And I'm sure that if you are not seeing them already, then you will most certainly see them at some time in the future, folks, because they're really ramping things up and they're conducting this type of activity all over the planet. Now, what they're doing here at the moment is they are putting up a set of surveillance cameras, or working towards putting up a set of surveillance cameras in town. And of course the police are saying they need these surveillance cameras because of the incredible amount of violence that happens in the town that I live, and because all of the people within the town are living in fear of the amount of crime that happens at night. When in reality nothing could be further from the truth. There's hardly any violence in this town. The violence that is in the town is usually alcohol related, or very often I believe it is staged, as some violence that happened here a couple of weeks ago, coincidentally the very night that a Channel 10 news team was in town all the way here from Sydney, just happened to be in town, and it happened to be wandering around the streets with their news cameras at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there just happened to be a whole lot of street violence committed by a group of young men that no one had ever seen before, that obviously came in from out of town just coincidentally on the very night the Channel 10 news crew was here with their cameras, and a couple of days after the council had told the police in no uncertain terms that they did not want cameras to be put in the town. And of course, just 2 days before we saw the violence in town, there was also a group of police officers walking around town, just pointing at places where they wanted to have the cameras and discussing it amongst themselves. So that's kind of how it all went down, folks. We'd like to put cameras in. No, you can't put cameras in. Okay, well, here's where we'd like to put them. And oh, look, there's a whole bunch of street violence on the very night that the news crew's here to film it. Just a big coincidence, of course. So now we can put it on national news to get national attention on the issue that we really want to put cameras here. So, see, we really do need some cameras, and so we're going to put them in anyway. And folks, if what we saw here wasn't a case of Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, then I really don't know what was, because it was absolutely obvious that that's what just occurred. And that's here in Byron Bay, folks. And this isn't exactly a big town, and we do not have all of the violence that the police claim we have. But we've had a new police chief installed who's come up here from Sydney, and so we've seen a huge escalation in police presence in the town. I think these people believe that if they could get Byron Bay, then they can get anywhere, because it is in this whole Byron district that we see some of the most awake people in Australia. So I think it's a real prize for them, and that's why I believe they are going for it first, because it is absolutely the jewel in the crown. And they probably figure, well, if they can get all of this draconian stuff in place here in Byron Bay, then they can get it done anywhere. Now, the reason I just brought all of that to you is because I want you to see what's going on around you. I mean, this is what's happening in a small town on the east coast of Australia, where nothing much really happens. It's a bit of a tourist mecca. It's kind of cosmopolitan. We have backpackers from all over the world coming through. And so, of course, the council has allowed the opening of 2 or 3 nightclubs in town, and they've turned the place into a little bit of a party haven for backpackers, where young travellers can come and hang out with other young travellers and do the things that young travellers do. And of course, what these young travellers are encouraged to do by our society is to party as hard as they can all the way around the world, because kids are taught that that's what life's about. It's just a big party. So go waste yourself. Don't look at what's going on around you. And this creates this non-stop group of partying travellers that go around the world. And so this, of course, increases the amount of street crime and violence. And so this, of course, increases the amount of security and draconian measures needed by government in order to control the escalation in crime that they've created themselves. And as I said, folks, this is what is going on in a small town on the east coast of Australia. And this is happening because although this is a very awake area, it's very awake in as far as spiritual concepts and concepts of consciousness, but a lot of the people here are very locked into that right-brained reality. They're not in a balance of right and left brain. They're not in a balance of spirituality and physicality. And all of these things are going on around the people, right under their noses, while they are locked in a bubble of love and light saying, it's not my reality. So they're failing to apply their consciousness to the world around them. They're ignoring what's going on around them, and they're allowing this police state to be built around them in the belief that they will be saved by an external source, when really the true answers they are looking for lie within themselves. And very often when people find these answers within themselves, they fail then to apply those understandings to the world around them. If you can truly begin to understand the oneness within which human consciousness actually exists, the oneness that is the collective mind of man, if you can perceive all others as holding their own truth because of their unique perspective of reality, if you can see each one of these people as being as valid as yourself, but no more or no less valid than yourself, which means that you are no more or no less valid than anybody else, this understanding itself can free you very much from the system, because suddenly you can perceive that the system is indeed fiction. And if you stand in your flesh, if you understand that what exists between yourself and the system are either contractual obligations, consensual contractual obligations that you've consented to, or are in fact simple trust agreements, then you can begin to see how free you actually are if you choose to exercise your freedom, choose to exercise your rights. And you begin to see how easy it would be to change the direction the world is going. You see, it all comes down to changing your perspective of what your relationship to reality is. And I believe, and I've very often said that I believe the real remedy lies in changing the vibration within your heart. And I know this may sound airy-fairy, hippy-trippy to people, but it isn't. Because once you can just meditate on some of the things I've said in the show today, just really let it sink in how reality works and what your relationship to it is, then open your eyes and look around and you see the world through new eyes. You really do. You see your relationship to the world in a completely different manner. And that's where true freedom is. And when you know the truth really, truly shall set you free. Because the truth of the things that I've brought to you on the show today is pure and self-evident. That's the thing, folks. The self-evident truth is exactly that, self-evident. The truth of the things that I've brought you on the show today, if people had the understanding of these simple truths, then the understanding of these simple truths could completely circumvent the events that I've just described to you happening in the town with which I live. If people thought this way, if people understood reality in this way, these events simply couldn't transpire. The authorities simply wouldn't get away with these things. The system itself would cease to function in its present form. If people simply understood the basic and simple truth about how reality works, what their relationship to reality is, what their relationship to government is, and what the system itself is.